They're very traditional based businesses and industries where they focus, but they want to add a core component. They want to add something like decentralized storage. They want to add NFT integration. They want to add, for instance, a token gate of some sort. So a gated exclusivity in what they're doing. Or they're starting to look at things like decentralized autonomous organizations and DAOs. How do they get pieces of this without needing it? Or even one of the best examples of that is oracles. How do you have data verification in an application that you've never had something like that before? You
Right.
probably want that, right? You want to be
Right.
verified that the weather data you're getting is actually coming from AccuWeather, for
Right.
instance, right? Or
Right.
real time from where Albert is versus where Will is versus where you are versus where I am. So there's all those types of things that I think are pretty exciting. And again, we're seeing that now. Fast forward in my personal prediction in the rest of 22 going into 23, I think you're going to see a lot more of that from the industry and the broader picture. And in Stacks and what we fund is we're already looking at more businesses in that, again, previous internet era that are looking to migrate. And for us as investors, that's awesome. I think initially there was a little bit of a misconception. Everything had to be decentralized.
Right.
What I started realizing when studying this and reading, oddly enough, the first white paper that was written for Blockstack, now Stacks, I saw how there were different components of that actually replicated what we had seen in Web2 startups. And in talking to a lot of enterprises and talking to a lot of developers and talking to a lot of those infrastructure technologists, realized together that instead of just going all in and potentially creating a disaster for what you're trying to do and having a bad taste in your mouth about what the technology could be, that there was ways to kind of ease into it.
Welcome to Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel, where we explore projects in decentralized finance that are innovating and driving our mission of financial freedom forward. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review Mission DeFi and spread the word by posting a tweet to the show. All opinions expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests are their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Black Knox, Material Indicators, or any other affiliated organizations. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests as an inducement to make a particular investment, follow a particular strategy, or become involved with any project. A project being featured on the show is not an endorsement of that project in any way. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Now, here's Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel.
I'm excited today to have with me three guys from the Stacks ecosystem. And for those of you listening, most of the folks we talk to live in the Ethereum or the Avalanche or Phantom or BNB ecosystems. I'm excited because I think it's really critical that wherever we can spread DeFi, we do. And these folks are in the Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem, and Stacks is the leading and dominant force in that space. And all of them are actually involved and engaged with helping grow that ecosystem by accelerating startups in the space and providing funds in that space to help people become a part of it and get new users into DeFi and Bitcoin. I also personally think Bitcoin has a bit of a future competitive advantage, reaching out to people beyond the hardcore DeFi folks. So I'm excited to see what Stacks ends up doing in the longer term. So first, I'm going to introduce everybody, and then we'll let them introduce themselves with a little bit of background. So I've got Albert Lang, Managing Director of Web 3.0 Startup Labs. I've got Kyle Ellicott, Partner at Stacks, and Will Corcoran, the Grant Program Lead for the Stacks Foundation. So I think we've got all of the pieces of your ecosystem together, and it's incredible how developed you guys are with this. So why don't we get started with Kyle? Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us your background, how you ended up in this world, and kind of what your role is in the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks very much, Brad. Happy to be here. And so I'm Kyle Ellicott. I'm a partner at Stacks Ventures. So we are the ventures ecosystem venture fund for the entire Stacks and also investing in throughout the Bitcoin ecosystem as well. So as investors, we look to invest in everything from the earliest of stages of companies all the way through late series based companies as well that are looking to build on Bitcoin and integrate Stacks as a technology throughout their applications. as well. And so to date, we've been around for just over a year now. We've invested in almost around 50 companies as well
Right.
at different stages and geographies around the world. And you're going to hear a little bit more from the other guests as well. So Albert and Will, kind of how we all work together. But at Stacks Ventures, we have a pre-accelerator program, we have an accelerator program, and then we have a full-fledged venture fund, in addition to where I co-chair, which is called Bitcoin Odyssey. And that's a $165 million pledge with ourselves and a group of about 20 plus tier one venture capitalists that together we have all pledged that $165 million to invest in companies building in and out around the Bitcoin ecosystem. So that includes stacks, that includes Lightning, that includes ecosystems that are looking to bridge into the world of Bitcoin and some of the topics that we're going to be discussing today. So
Wow, that's
that's a
very
little bit
cool.
of what I do.
Right. Then what's your background? How'd you end up in this?
It's a great question and a long story. I'll give you the short version. I've been in venture capital for over a decade now, and also working with accelerators and early stage to late stage startups, investing more particularly in blockchain around 2015. And then the space that we refer to today as Web3, I began really getting into it as an investor around 2018, and also working as an analyst to study the entire industry, looking at how to classify, map, and categorize all of the insanity that this industry can offer at its time. And from there, started looking at all the different categories and subcategories, themes, emerging trends, and what may or may not be coming down the pipe. And that led me into the area which you and I were talking about pre-show, about decentralized applications and the future of applications. I started building a thesis around the idea that how the internet has evolved, but also how applications have evolved, that the area of decentralized applications would be the next wave of future internet that we all look at and are a part of today, and a big part of our digital lives going forward as well. And so started studying that and realizing, as applications in the past were very linear as how you built them, very, very one, two, three, you have an app. Decentralized applications are not that way. They actually comprise of many different components, and they don't always have to be full decentralized or partially decentralized. There's just bits and pieces that can bring those things together. So an application in the previous world of Web 2 or 2.5, so the social and e-commerce internet that we know all very commonly, applications in that era can actually begin to become decentralized. They can begin to add components of wallet integration or decentralized storage or compute, et cetera. And so I started studying that area too, and started building a thesis around the future of applications and investing in everything from protocols to apps to some of those core technical infrastructure pieces. Fast forward, my partner and our managing director for Stacks Ventures, Trevor Owens, and I sat down, had a discussion, and here we are. So
Nice.
about 14 years later, or excuse me, 14 months later.
I was going to say, it feels like
Yeah,
14 years.
yeah, I've known Trevor for about that long as well. But yeah, it feels about 14 years. Years in Web3 are kind of like dog years. So yeah, about 14 months later, as I mentioned, we've got all these pieces that fit and support the ecosystem, from the capital and education acceleration side for startups. And yeah, that's where we are.
That's very cool. I won't digress into it now or jaunt off into it now, but I'm really fascinated by when you're talking about partial decentralization kind of stuff. The fact that Web2 companies or existing applications or existing markets don't necessarily have to go all in all at once, right? That there could be a migration. I mean, that's what I'm interpreting of what you said, a
Yeah.
migration into that. That's pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah. So I think there was a little bit of a misconception in the beginning, and we'll go further in on this later, as Will and Albert definitely have opinions and pieces of the story as well. But I think initially there was a little bit of a misconception. Everything had to be decentralized.
Right.
And again, if you look at the map, I think actually on the Ethereum side, building a decentralized application, it just looks like a squiggly line all the way through. It
Sure.
kind of loops back into itself. And what I started realizing when studying this and reading, oddly enough, the first white paper that was written for Blockstack, now Stacks, I saw how there were different components of that actually replicated what we had seen in Web 2 startups. And in talking to a lot of enterprises and talking to a lot of developers and talking to a lot of those infrastructure technologists, realized together that instead of just going all in and potentially creating a disaster for what you're trying to do and having a bad taste in your mouth about what the technology could be, that there was ways to kind of ease into it, as you mentioned. And so finding ways to trial what worked for you and what didn't. And we saw this in 2018, 2019, and a little less in 2020, specifically on corporates and enterprises as they were looking to integrate blockchain technology into their applications. Is it wasn't all or nothing. And when they did do it all, it became a destruction. It just didn't work. Or they realized like, this is just, there's nothing here. Instead, they started seeing the future of what it could be and that it was a progression that had to be rolled out over time, just like any technology, right? When we think about the industry of Web3, there's many different technologies within that. Those don't just turn on overnight. You don't just plug those into an app tomorrow and you're walking through. Sometimes, and all of us here are former developers and some current, we take for granted what it took and does still take to build apps of our previous lives. And that some of those things are node code based solutions. They are very quick and easy to integrate and deploy. Those also have a decade plus worth of trial and error to get them to that point. And us as developers have that and then some, not to age any of us, but that and then some of experience doing that. In this area of Web3, there's so much new. And on the consumer side, they're also not all ready for it as well. And so without going too much further, the review I did of the initial Blockstack white paper, and then the general theory of decentralized applications, which set an initial framework of what was fully or not fully decentralized as an app, an early framework in 2013, put together by 12 different individuals and venture capitalists at the time, and also developers. Kind of gave me this light, and that's how I started looking at it. That's how I started building a thesis. And I was very fortunate to fall into the Stacks ecosystem, having used that as, again, part of my core in developing all this.
That to me is a really fascinating approach because I think it solves a number of problems. You're right that it requires an evolution into this tech, whether you're a developer or a user, right? It's very difficult to go all at once. And the only people that are doing it are the early adopters like us that are willing to kind of dive in that deeply. And the other thing is I think that's a big boost on the side of what you guys are trying to build in terms of developer recruitment, right?
Yeah.
If you approach this from an ecosystem perspective of you don't have to go all in, you don't have to be a purist out of the gate. We can provide you the building blocks to start and gain the advantages that are most important to you. That's a really smart approach. I really like that a lot.
Well, thank you. And I'll give credit to everybody because I'm probably not the only one to discover it, but I'll give everybody credit. But we're starting to see how that has evolved, how the industry has evolved towards that here in 2022. And it's been fascinating because this industry, again, that I'll refer to today as Web3, it is just over a decade old, right? The Bitcoin white paper comes out at the end of 2008. The Genesis block happens right at the turn of the year in 2009. Fast forward, here we are in 2022. We haven't had a lot of time to trial and error a lot of these things and test a lot of this, integrate and see what happens. Now, we have a lot of core components that Will and Albert and some of those companies that we're working with all collectively in the ecosystem, and some of those that you mentioned when we kicked off. There's a lot that actually is very supportive or complementary to what we all wanted to see in previous applications or previous eras of the internet, but we just weren't there yet. And now the industry has started to open up around no-code solutions, open up to API integrations that connect and bridge the world of the previous web to the future digital economy and web that we're going to now. Whereas again, 18, 19, a little bit into 20 and in really before we got here to 21 and 22, it was a lot of raw pieces that you were trying to put this puzzle together or fully and all in. And now we've seen this all kind of evolve, listening to what people wanted, what applications needed, what worked, what didn't, what gaps need to be filled at an infrastructure level. And now you're starting to see more at this. How do we connect? How do we bridge? And how do we make this more seamless so that a company that was built 10 years ago, and we've funded now some of those as well, that they've been built 10 years ago. They're very traditional based businesses and industries where they focus, but they want to add a core component. They want to add something like decentralized storage. They want to add NFT integration. They want to add, for instance, a token gate of some sort. So a gated exclusivity in what they're doing. Or they're starting to look at things like decentralized autonomous organizations and DAOs. How do they get pieces of this without needing it? Or even one of the best examples of that is oracles. How do you have data verification in an application that you've never had something like that before? You
Right.
probably want that, right? You want to be verified that the weather data you're getting is actually coming from AccuWeather, for
Right.
instance, right? Or
Right.
real time from where Albert is versus where Will is versus where you are and versus where I am. So there's all those types of things that I think are pretty exciting. And again, we're seeing that now. Fast forward in my personal prediction in the rest of 22 going into 23, I think you're going to see a lot more of that from the industry and the broader picture. And in Stacks and what we fund is we're already looking at more businesses in that, again, previous internet era that are looking to migrate. And for us as investors, that's awesome. That's,
Yeah.
solid businesses, business models,
Absolutely.
product market fit, add a
Yep.
piece. There we go.
Yep. It's interesting. I've been advising a company. Well, they're on the Solana blockchain, but it's a company that for 5 years has been building mobile exercise apps on the traditional app store and did like 50 million in revenue over that time frame, and or a marketing machine and a development machine, from the perspective of onboarding and gaining new users and understanding kind of the psychology of getting people on board. And all they're doing is adding a tokenomics model to what they're doing in that blockchain, but their ability to lock in 160,000 users inside of 2 months in beta is pretty amazing. And so I think when you can merge the existing skills of these developers in the existing world of apps and web 2 or whatever, and then allow them to take pieces of what they need. They have plans to go much deeper in blockchain, but they wanted to start with just a piece, right? And they wanted to get out of the app stores. So for them, that motivation made a ton of sense, and the incentives for them and users make sense too. So that's great. I really, I've not heard that approach articulated this way. So I really am excited to hear you guys are taking that away.
Thank you. And the last thing I'll say, because I know Will and Albert again have a ton to say, but I having come from all these different traditional industries further deeper in my background, that's another way that I'm looking at it as well. And, looking at the future of fan engagement, sports and entertainment, looking at how wearables did not take in their initial phase, but now could with companies like that you're mentioning in others as well. And there's just so many traditional industries that these new incentive models, these new engagement pieces. I mean, look at the future of education, health, automotive, transportation, mobility, cities. There's all this gov tech and reg tech. I mean, that stuff can be changed overnight with some of the technologies that we're funding, that we're all a part of, whether that be the City Coins protocol that is a part of the Stacks ecosystem or otherwise. These are all things that have changed the paradigms or what we all wanted as consumers and builders in the past, but didn't yet know and could articulate in some cases what that would be. And we're very fortunate now to see some of that stuff. Again, a lot of it's being tested. A lot of it is still going through its ups and downs and trying to find out its gaps, its user experiences, et cetera. But it's very exciting. And we're very fortunate to be on the venture side to see all of this.
Yeah.
And to be able to fund this and also watch it go and mature from a very young stage to a very late stage.
That's great. That's great. All right, gentlemen, thanks for being so patient as I took us off in a tangent and wouldn't let him stop talking. Will, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us your background and tell us what you're up to?
Yeah, thanks. My background, I probably a little less orthodox or kind of aligned with the space than Kyle's. I was an architect for 20 years. And
Wow.
yeah, so I studied architecture and mechanical engineering and then practiced architecture, a number of different practices in a bunch of different cities for I think 15 years of practices. And my partner, she is a developer, and I was always lured into technology by seeing the sort of contrasting the way that her teams would work and the way that they would strategize and kind of map out problems and solve problems together in contrast to the way that, I would be handling things in the built environment. And so, yeah, really I had a great opportunity to lead a lot of different projects and lead a lot of different teams. And as a project architect, like I was, you're sort of like at the hub of all the spokes on the wheel where, you're you're speaking to a lot of different audiences every day, whether it be contractors or, a wealthy like hedge fund manager that's also a real estate developer, or someone that is a homeowner, or an institution or a board of directors that represents an institution for someone that you're a client of, and then also designers and engineers on the other end. So a lot of coordination, a lot of like kind of taking chaos and trying to discern the critical path and move things forward. And really just like kept flirting, early in my career, after the engineering degree, I was actually started off at a SOM. It's a large architectural firm, did like the Sears Tower and the World Trade Center, and started a computational design group within that firm. And so I was actually programming as part of that's what I was getting paid to do. So I was doing a lot of interoperability between like sort of structural engineers and the architects and, different disciplines. So really had a lot of, a portion of time where I dipped my toe into that world and then kind of went down like a more integrated development path called design build, where you're the construction manager and the architect. And so really kind of touched a bunch of different points of the landscape, but kept coming back to the programming side and the development side. So yeah, through my partners, I guess, nudging, kept like getting into like going into a boot camp and really like being exposed to some of the most contemporary ways that people are learning about development now and learning about picking up these new skills, whether it be with Code Wars or Riplet or Full Stack Academy or, any one of these online boot camps. And so that's just like a really interesting mode of learning in a decentralized, non-physical space, and kept getting further and further into it. Actually studied some UX UI design, and then really like all of the pieces were, I was getting exposed to all the different disciplines on a development team, and felt like, all right, I'm gonna walk away from architecture and try and figure this out. And so my partner, who I keep referring to, she actually works for Hero. So when Kyle mentioned Blockstack, so imagine the Cambrian event of Blockstack becoming all of these different entities. So Kyle works for Stacks Ventures, I work for Stacks Foundation. And so Stacks Ventures is obviously doing on the venture side. The Stacks Foundation is the nonprofit that sort of is the foundation that supports a lot of the core developers, the core protocol and the governance that helps, secure that and, maintain the fact that it is a user contributed open source technology. And then the more for-profit developer tooling side, that's a company called Hero, and that's where she works. So she was on the wallet, and they do the wallet, they do Stacks.js, they do the API, they do the Block Explorer, a lot of like other developer tools. And so through her kind of propelling into that world got me excited about it. And then I just started hanging out in Discord servers and meeting people, and like, just sort of became this like 40-year-old DJ, and like was all of a sudden went from being an architect to being a mod and an NFT mint. And then all of a sudden I heard about this position that became available to lead the grants program at the foundation. I just thought it was a perfect fit. I love mentoring people. I love like leading teams. And I love, as I mentioned, speaking the different languages between stakeholders, designers, engineers, like technical, non-technical people. And yeah, so I've just kind of dove in head first, and I've been learning a ton about all the different, composable elements of the development ecosystem. Like Kyle was mentioning, like it's developing or designing that app is not an all or nothing proposition. And so there are opportunities to like, make those design decisions and determine like, okay, what parts of this make sense or would add value or critical to gaining some amount of either security, speed, or decentralization. And yeah, just supporting. So like the main, I guess, focus of what I do is support builders that are interested in building open source technology that will lead us towards a more user-owned internet, secured by Stacks technology, powered by Stacks technology and secured by Bitcoin. So,
That's awesome.
yeah,
Well, what I love is one of the things I love about this space is how many people came from other careers and other professions and ended up here. And it's fascinating because I think the default is to say, oh, well, it's because it's financial and we all kind of come into it. But what I think is interesting is the skill sets that we learn. When you were talking earlier about, managing projects and dealing with projects and thinking about all the people you have to communicate with, that's naturally needed in all aspects of this ecosystem because we're all figuring out all the pieces at the same time, right? So
yeah.
that's fascinating background, man. That's really cool that you got
Right.
that you just like
Yeah.
migrated into this gig. That's great.
It wasn't the money that lured me. It was the promise of greater coordination.
Nice. Nice. That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Albert, you and I talked. I know a lot about you now, but I want you to tell everybody else. Tell us about yourself and how you ended up
Thanks,
here.
Brad. Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I really enjoyed Will's and Kyle's introduction because I feel like I'm sort of in between. Like
Nice.
I like what Will just said. I would have to steal that Will. I'm also like a 40-year-old new DJ, right? And at the same time, I come from a more tech background. Wrote my first line of code when I was 8.5, 9 years old. Started my first business when I was 12. I was born in San Francisco. Grew up in Southern California. I was in La Jolla for 5 years, and I went back to the Bay Area right before the dot-com crash. So many of my friends who were a couple years older than me already made money there. I went there, and a few months later,
Oh, brutal.
right? Brutal, right? The choice was go to Wall Street or go to Silicon Valley, and I picked Silicon Valley, right?
Nice.
And hit the dot-com crash, which I guess in the end it turned out really well because that's like the event in my life that caused me to go to Shanghai, China. And I've been here for about 20 years now.
Wow.
And started several different online and offline companies, most of them ending in disaster, some of them doing okay, right? And about 8 years ago, I found my life's purpose, which is to help people launch their ideas. Because I realized from, what I was adolescent to an adult, the happiest times of my life was when I was creating something or helping someone else create something. And then I realized that it's very natural to put aside our differences and collaborate on something and to create a higher level of innovation. So it became my life's purpose to basically combine kindness, innovation, collaboration, and one day hopefully take it across the world. And I think that's really been my motivating drive, right? People say, Albert, how did you like 8 years ago, you started this and now you're the longest running pre-accelerator, not just in Shanghai, but in China. And how did you do 9 cohorts last year in 1 year alone? Most people have trouble doing 1 or 2 in 1 year. How did you do 9? I said, well, yeah, maybe it's a mental illness. Maybe it's just like a pattern. And so long story short, one of the big factors that helped us become the longest running pre-accelerator in China was almost 5 years ago now. Trevor helped me turn a consultancy. 8 years ago, it was just a consultancy helping people turn their ideas into businesses. Basically, whatever the accelerators don't touch because it's too early, we'll do it. Right? That's
Nice.
basically it. Yeah. And so it was like one up. Yeah. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah. Okay. And almost 5 years now, Trevor helped me turn that consultancy into a pre-accelerator program. Right.
Nice.
So about 4.5 years ago, we launched our first pre-accelerator cohort. And between then and now, we did 21 cohorts. We did 5 in the year of COVID, 9 last year. And before we launched this Stacks pre-accelerator program, we did 3 this year already. Okay. So this is actually at Stacks is our 22nd. And this is not globally, this is what I found out is quite a few cohorts for pre-accelerator.
I would say so. 3 or 4 would be normal in a year, maybe. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, just 3 or 4 would be a lot already. Right. So, we started off, we weren't like the best team and we weren't the most well-funded team. And we only had 2 people when we started, but we're the most passionate team
Nice.
with the most focused vision, because every single year, as you can imagine, in a city of 25 million people, in a country of 1.4 billion people are trying to start up pre-accelerators like every day. Like who doesn't want to, help people start at the ideation stage because it's fun. It's fun, but it's tough though.
Yeah.
It's very tough, right? So I mean, Trevor reached out to me last year and said, Albert, we have like way more applications than we can handle right now. You got to come over, check this out. I'm like, no, I'm in the middle. This is like, keep in mind, a year ago, I was in the middle of these 9 cohorts. So basically it's like double stacked, right? Finish recruiting one. As soon as you start that cohort, you're already marketing for the next cohort. And on the second half, it's like overlapping.
Wow.
So, yeah. So this is like tiered, and plus the marketing is tiered too, right? So it's just too busy, right? But long story short, February this year, I had Chinese New Year. We had a time to take a break and start, I reached back out to Trevor, right? And, I really started looking at Web 3.0. And also I had a few students that were doing Web 3.0 related stuff. For example, one of my students, his first company, he started this is like a turning moment for me, right? So he started a keto diet restaurant. It's his first business, and he opened up the restaurant real quick, and I actually got the profitability real quick, which is quite unusual for a first time business owner and restaurant owner, right?
Sure.
And all of a sudden he said, Albert, I'm closing the restaurant down. So what are you doing? I'm like, this is like, most people like just dream of running a profitable restaurant, the first time they start a business. What are you doing? He's like, well, I raised a crypto fund with a few other friends. It's $30 million US, right? And we're investing in 2 projects a week. What? Mind blown.
Like, wait a minute. That's crazy.
That's crazy. It's crazy. Mind blown. So like, I really believe in fate in a sense, right? So going up to this February when I reached back out to Trevor, the 6 months before, many things were happening that were related to Web 3.0, blockchain, or metaverse, right? And there was a quickening. There's a quickening, not just like in my life, but also in the number of applicants in our own pre-accelerator, right? So I knew something big was happening. And then of course, the first thing I did was, check Google, how many global crypto wallets are there, right? And it's at the time, I think it was like 400 million. I said, well, let's divide that by 5 or divide that by 10. So at least there's 40 million to 80 million people globally, right? And whenever you have like that caucus of people, that's an inflection point. It's reached that inflection point where, it's relatively slow growth and it's going to pop, right? Yep. So I said, all right, it's time to get into Web3.
This is the
place. This is a place. This is a place, right?
That's awesome.
And then I talked to my friends. I had a friend who was the first investor of Binance, some friends who did other blockchains, etc. And they're like, "What, Stacks?" And like, I guess most people, if they hear like their friends say like, "What is this like really small blockchain?" They'd probably be scared. But remember, my vision is to take innovation across the world, and I'm happiest at the ideation stage, right? So
sure.
So I went, okay, well, maybe Trevor's onto something. So I started Googling this, right? And Stacks does not show up on the first page of the Google results. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Because this is like an ecosystem that is just beginning, right? Because I would hate to have to jump into something like when it's already mature. But that's
right.
Completely against my
doesn't fit you.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't fit me. Doesn't fit me. Like once the building's done, like that's boring. That's boring. Right. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
So yeah. So that's basically in a nutshell how I got here. Right. And of course,
great.
Yeah.
That's really cool, guys. So let's get into Stacks and start talking about it. And just give people an overview of, if you could give us an overview of what it is, how it fits with Bitcoin, right? I obviously know something about it in terms of its relationship to Bitcoin, but I think most people initially think, oh, well, Bitcoin, you can't really write complex smart contracts for it. How can it have real DeFi? And so then I think people's minds go to Lightning Network and some possibilities there. But can you guys one of you run through, what Stacks is, how it functions in relation to Bitcoin, and how Bitcoin helps secure what you guys are doing on Stacks?
Yeah. So Stacks, it's a it's a layer 1 blockchain that, as you've noted, has its security budget that relies on Bitcoin. So the Stacks blockchain settled back onto Bitcoin, and there's a relationship between the two where every Stacks address has a corresponding Bitcoin address. And the way that Stacks are mined just like you would sort of use proof of work of expending electricity with the opportunity to show that you're a good faith actor and you're competing for the block reward of Bitcoin. Same thing happens with stacks, but you're sending Bitcoin into a smart contract for the opportunity to try and have to win the block reward of stacks in exchange for your Bitcoin. And so that is a consensus algorithm that is called proof of transfer. And so the other part of the transfer is that all of the participants of the network that want to lock up their stacks or stake, like you refer to on most networks with double stacking, you actually earn a 10% yield from that. And that's not like a promotional, for these months only. It's part of the
The core part of the chain.
core part of the
Functions.
yeah.
Nice.
And so that is a function of the fact that you have miners that are competing, and a portion of the resulting stacks comes back to the winning miner, but then the rest of the Bitcoin that doesn't get transferred into the stacks then gets dispersed to the participants of the network. So the 10% yield, obviously has some amount of fluctuation. It's probably akin to the difficulty adjustment with Bitcoin mining. It depends on how many people are participating in the mining, how many people are participating in stacking. But that alone right there is already at the foundational level DeFi, because, if the total market cap of the Stacks blockchain is say $1.5 billion, we would have a TVL of $900 million, I think is last time I checked. So the vast majority of people that I know and that you meet on line and whatnot that buy stacks, these are individuals, like the Venn diagram of people that are interested in stacks are either, hey, I'm coming at this from a Bitcoin forward or a Bitcoin centrist point of view, or hey, I've learned about this from other decentralized, networks and chains. And so really the I guess the core function that we're talking about is having that staking reward all locked up. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Oh, that's okay. I think there's probably a lot of UST investors that would have liked to have known about that 10%. Years ago. So so I get that. And I think that I actually think I have actually referred to stacks as almost a layer 2, but it's really a layer 1 blockchain that utilizes Bitcoin.
Yeah, so people will call it a layer 1.5.
Oh, I like that.
It's not a side chain. It's not a layer 2, but it definitely has a relationship in terms of you can recreate the Stacks blockchain from the Bitcoin blockchain.
Nice.
In terms of every block, all of the micro blocks and stacks are, anchored back to a Bitcoin block. And so within that Bitcoin block is the entire Stacks blockchain. So you can, again, recreate the whole Stacks blockchain from the Bitcoin blockchain. And if security budget comes from the Bitcoin blockchain. So if you're going to attempt to have a 51% attack on stacks, it would also have to overcome Bitcoin. And so that is, I think, one of the really novel characteristics is the relationship to Bitcoin. The fact that, it's, I guess, if you think about it, the kind of tagline of smart contracts for Bitcoin. So that's the Bitcoin side. The smart contract side comes from smart contracting language, which is Clarity. And I think that there's some really interesting distinctions between Clarity and Solidity. For example, Clarity is kind of a derivative of Lisp. It's a human readable language. It's non-Turing complete. So what you see is what you get. It doesn't compile in the bytecode at execution. So every smart contract that you write, it's all open source. So you can go into the block explorer, you can read
and see the smart contract.
Yeah. So there's no, the kind of concerns that you might have of signing a smart contract on another platform where you don't know exactly what you're agreeing to because you don't see all of the post conditions and the code itself because it's been compiled. That is not the case on Stacks. And so I think that back to Albert's point of like kind of new to the neighborhood and that, hey, it's not like this fully mature ecosystem is one, it's kind of like shocking to me because I feel like Stacks is the center of the universe just from like where I spend all my time. But yeah, I mean, really like the really like promising, refreshing thing of hearing that is that it is so new. And I think that the technology like at the protocol level is growing. We have some really exciting scaling solutions coming out this year, hyperchains in particular. And so as the core protocol grows, that is one thing because that is maturing. And then also the developer tooling around the Clarity smart contract language. So trying to onboard all of the devs that are interested in, if you're going from Ethereum to Avalanche, obviously you can, just move from one chain to the other because you're working in Solidity. And I think that our kind of, arc of growth is going to be unique and because it really like, it's going to rely on the quality of the educational material around Clarity really coming into fruition, the network effects of people, learning and teaching other people Clarity and all of the tutorials and, educational opportunities that will come from that. So that's kind of that's my perspective on Stacks, my understanding. I'm not like a dev. I'm certainly not a Rust developer or, like a core blockchain contributor or anything like that. I'm the grants program lead. And so my point of view is.
So you're not writing core blockchain
No,
code at all.
but
Okay.
I have like a couple of goals in mind, like at the top metal level for the year, and that's get more Bitcoin liquidity on Stacks, unlock utility for Bitcoin via Stacks smart contracts, and grow the number of Clarity developers. I mean, that's what I'm doing.
And Brad, just to add on to that. So short and sweet. So layer twos provide scalability. Stacks, as Will said, is a layer one that provides programmability to and of the Bitcoin network, right?
Makes
So
sense.
Stacks enables programming of the Bitcoin network and some of the components that he mentioned around stability, security. This is all what Stacks allows you to take advantage of at a scaling speed. And we'll continue to go through some of the upgrades that he mentioned, like hyperchains, things like that are rolling out as well. Now, also just to note is, it has been mentioned a few times, it is an early ecosystem. So we had mainnet launch in January of 2021. So fast forward, we're a year and a half in to mainnet launch. We've got the layer itself out. We have Clarity smart contracts. So again, another comparable to that of Solidity on the EVM or the Ethereum side. And then we do have some additional protocols that have been launched and are also being built on top of Stacks. So as I mentioned in my initial introduction, Citycoins is a protocol built on top of Stacks, leveraging Stacks itself and some of the stacking mechanisms along with POX, proof of transfer, the consensus mechanism, and the stability and security of the Bitcoin network for cities and for governments and for CivTech or GovTech, et cetera, as well. And the last point I'll say is what's very unique about our area of focus or our area of expertise from a technical standpoint is some of those themes that we were talking about pre-show is DeFi, so decentralized finance, and non-fungible tokens or NFTs, that now those can be hand or take advantage of the security and stability of the Bitcoin network, which is incredibly important. And we've seen a lot of interest in and outside of our ecosystem for the need of that around Bitcoin. So to give you a broader, I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot.
Yeah.
And then from the reason I'll throw that in there as well, from the venture side, we see everything, all ecosystems. Sure. And there are some pieces that other ecosystems, those that are developing in, want, and vice versa. And I think we're now starting to see a very big, strong interest around DeFi and the future of non-fungible tokens. So non-fungible tokens and NFTs with added utility, where now Stacks will play a very unique role going forward in being able to provide for those particular applications, along with many others like gaming and some of the others we'll talk about.
That's perfect. I appreciate that. In terms of, look, I think the holy grail for any project like this is developer recruitment, and it's the whole, two-sided marketplace thing. You need the users, you need the developers, and it's this constant pain. I know. What has it been like? I mean, I would assume that with Clarity, you're able to target a kind of a different and similar group of developers that you would also that EVM compatible machines may be targeting, but you can also go after another segment of the population world, especially kind of with that Lisp similarity. Have you guys found that onboarding people from whatever, have you found a particular language that are migrating more rapidly to you of developers? And have you found that onboarding process as you're learning and providing more educational materials? Is that getting easier for you?
Yes, those are some things that maybe I have the most proximity to. The foundation kind of champions a lot of different initiatives. And so I like to think of the people on this call as like, I always like pitch this when I'm giving talks, but I think of it as like a spectrum of support mechanisms. And so there's like, if you imagine Kyle Stacks Ventures being like at one end of that spectrum, being like the very like entrepreneurial kind of on your way to like, okay, we have like, product market fit and a real kind of working business model and working product. And so like at the other end of that spectrum is initiatives like Clarity Universe. And that is where, our educational efforts that go into like community colleges and other universities. I friends with different Ivy Leagues and teach, small classes on Clarity, and then also online with Codesmith is where it's all delivered. And we're also partnering with some other top tier kind of like the build spaces of the world and people that are putting together more complete tutorial packages along the lines of educating people. And so I don't know that there's any like one particular pedigree of developer that comes into the world of Clarity. I know that there's probably like equal parts of, hey, I've had some exposure to Solidity and smart contracting, and I learned about Clarity, and I'm excited by the syntax and the language and the design of that more than I was of this, and so I'm going to check this out. And then there's also individuals that are coming from CoinScript and say, hey, like I've been working on Bitcoin, and I feel like there's parts of a project or a product or a solution that I want to build over there. But, we also need expressive smart contracts. So we're going to, utilize stacks for that component, that aspect of the overall project. And then there's also people that come at it from a Web 2 point of view that are either like, hey, I'm a JavaScript developer. I work in TypeScript, and I know that there's some correlations between TypeScript and Clarity and some different, I guess, similarities along that regard. And then there's also just people that are like, I don't know anything about developing, and I'm going to sit in on this course and learn about smart contracts. And
Nice.
I think, it's I believe like an easy enough to learn, language to be able to like sit down and put together human readable smart contracts. And the fact that you can go and interact with an application or a project online and then get in the block explorer and read the code you just interacted with to understand the transaction. Okay, here's the transaction. This is what it looks like. This is the script basically for that action. I think that like one-to-one is is highly valuable in terms of being able to expedite or accelerate the educational process.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like you guys are covering all the bases. That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. In terms of kind of the startups that you guys are seeing coming into the funnel, right? Well, let's talk about. I've sat in on a demo day a few months back, and then recently I got in for about an hour and then had to bolt.
Yeah.
But what I noticed in the previous demo day I sat into was, I went into this with this bias of expecting it just to be a bunch of rehashed, Ethereum and, DeFi projects. And I was like, holy crap, about halfway through, I thought to
The
myself,
new
wow, this
business
is,
law.
yeah. I was like, this is like unique shit going on here. This is like some really cool models. I saw a few things that had some similarities and traits, but that's going to happen in this space. But are you guys finding that kind of the freshness of what you're doing is making for people that are just coming into this fresh and not having been in the DeFi world, and that's why you're getting kind of new concepts and ideas around DeFi and NFTs and gaming and everything? And what are the things that are kind of standing out for you in terms of the entrepreneurs that you're getting to come in and build in this
I,
space?
I'm going to tee this up for Albert because I've seen his syllabus and he's got 19 guest lectures coming in with
Nice.
all talking about basically business use cases empowered by Stacks technology. And
Nice.
so the proof of transfer protocol, for instance, is something that, having a passive like guaranteed Bitcoin yield is something that you can build new businesses around.
So many ideas.
Yeah. So anyway, Albert, maybe you can expand on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Will. Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm very impressed by the way you're asking the questions, Brad, because this is like a deep dive into what we do every day. So it's a
Cool.
good opportunity to
I'm
share.
just nerding out over here, man. It's all good.
Awesome. We all are. So yeah, thanks. And thanks, Will, for passing this off. Yeah, I mean, let me touch on the technology part a little bit. So we were aiming for 10 teams this first cohort. We ended up getting 25. And yeah, so got lucky there. But it also speaks to a growing ecosystem, right? The rising tide rises all boats, right? So it wasn't like, it was actually quite easy. It was like surprisingly like just, it's almost like going downstream and easily finding 25 teams.
Sure.
And like Will said, there's people coming from different types of backgrounds. About 80% of our teams came in with coding experience, and it is a medley. But the ones that stood out was, I noticed that there are a few more who maybe came from a Java or a JavaScript background, and like Will said, they might have already tried something on Slitty or even built like some light projects there, but they weren't too deep in, and then they were able to look at it objectively, right?
Right.
And then they like the elegance of clarity, right? So if you're like a pure coder and you just like coding just to code, and you open up and compare them side by side, you'll immediately see the beauty of clarity right away. Thanks. And not to mention that the ecosystem there's so many opportunities, right? So you could basically code whatever you want, right? So it's like very, very, very free. So it's not just like the code is better, but the environment is better for you to really open up your mind, right?
Nice.
So and that's probably where you're seeing like, wow, there's like really fresh new stuff.
Yeah.
Because you're not constricted, like, if you're in a more mature place, right?
Absolutely.
That's one of the beautiful things about being at Stacks and building on Bitcoin, right? That this, 2022 and moving forward is going to become more and more fun, right?
Yeah.
Because we're definitely on the up ramp, not on the down ramp in terms of
Absolutely.
what can be built and the whole composability factor of blockchain makes it so a lot of the, like Kyle said, invest in 50 teams. We'll be building these building blocks, right? So in the beginning, it's like you're just inching forward, but now you have all the building blocks. So you can build it real fast.
Nice.
Some things you could launch in a couple of weeks, right? It could be real fast.
Because you can reuse, basically what you're saying is because the developers can reuse existing components that have already been built by other developers, have the functionality they need, whether it's lending or minting an NFT or whatever it might be. They don't have to rebuild that from scratch because there's so much maturing in the ecosystem to make that possible. That's awesome.
Yeah.
As an example, to highlight that, there's a grant that was awarded a couple of months ago to a team called DLC Link, and they are building a whole set of a toolkit for working with discrete log contracts, which is a Bitcoin primitive. And so DLCs are basically like an escrow contract, a multi-sig contract on Bitcoin that is multi-party, has like a 2 of 3 quorum, and one of the signatures or keys is triggered by an oracle. And so the link in that, they have an advisor that comes from Chainlink, got some funding out of Chainlink Labs. And so really like they've been working on, I guess, taking a lot of documentation that was created within the DLC sub community of Bitcoin, which I think that one thing I'm learning is that the development community on Bitcoin is so intense and so robust that it can be like very impenetrable sometimes to like, more like, I guess, to younger developers that are coming in that might not like know all of the paths to get through some of the Byzantine, chat rooms and whatnot to find the resources that they need. And so a lot of what they've been working on is kind of refreshing and making sure that
Nice.
that is more accessible to all developers on Bitcoin and Stacks. And then taking the DLC logic, the DLC primitive and extending the Clarity smart contracting language so that there's a library that allows for bi-directional communication between the DLCs and Clarity smart contracts. And so they're a grantee and they were working on this project. They actually got accepted into the accelerator while they were doing that. They're going through the accelerator right now. And then this week, they posted a hackathon in Albert's startup lab. And so through that, you have developers that are working on top of a new library, experimenting with new technology that was funded, that helps better, bring more utility to Bitcoin via Stacks. And the results of that, there's 4 teams that are, have what I'm told are like fundable, product ready ideas that are coming out of that, because the idea of being able to hold native Bitcoin in escrow without racking it, without leaving the chain or doing anything, and being able to interact with it vis-a-vis, Clarity smart contracts and an Oracle is a pretty important unlock. And,
That's powerful.
yeah. And so there's a lot of B2B, B2C, C2C, opportunities there that a lot of different people are exploring. And so, yeah, I think that when you're saying dropping into the accelerator open house and seeing some new, refreshing, I guess, unusual, unexpected business use cases, I think that that's part of the technology that you're seeing. And then also on the very far end of that is like kind of talked about the POX Lite is what we call it. So proof transfer Lite that empowers Stacks derivatives like city coins. And so you are actually seeing people that are doing a lot of like civic technology. So we've also funded grants that go to people that are building a proof of hodl cellular like Wi-Fi. They're working with the city venture in the city of Miami. I forget what the department's called. Anyway, they're in there and they're doing an audit of all the civic wide cellular infrastructure, and they are able to upload small packets so that individuals that hold city coins in a mobile wallet would then be able to get, say, preferential, like, hey, you get free Wi-Fi, or you get improved signal, or you get, like easier, like to pay a parking meter, something like that. And so there's a lot of different kind of IRL and IoT use cases that can also be empowered by some of this technology.
That's compelling. And that actually furthers the case, right? For what Citicoin was is meant to be and is already doing, right? Piling money into the coffers of the city of Miami here, but also giving now a use case that enhances the value of that on the streets. I think that's going to be really compelling. And that's one of those things that I think drives back kind of how do we bridge the gap between those of us that are degens and freaks in the DeFi space and, these folks out there that can benefit from the capabilities that we're enabling, whether it be functionality and privilege and growing more wealth, or whatever it is that can be enabled and capable. That's really cool. That's a great example. I love that.
And on the government side, I'll just add, Brad, and I'll touch on demo day in a minute as well. But
Cool.
on the government side, so yeah, it's all about us as users and as citizens and as people, by all means. But there are also some industries that traditionally technology does not integrate well. There's lack of budget and notorious approval process. We all know this. And so something like a Citicoin's protocol, what it does, and for me, why I got super excited from the venture side and just as an individual wanting to invest more in companies in this area, is it now allows things and applications in government, within cities and the citizens themselves to provide and build city-based applications.
Nice.
The ability to do that without having to go through this wild, crazy process. So the government of a city, small to the largest, can now start integrating decentralized types of technology into their cities, for their residents, for their own systems, for their own applications, and start to provide some things that they may have wanted, they may have been missing as well, and actually push themselves forward. So now, one of the things that we've talked about with some of the community, all three of us, and then some, has been, the smallest town, not city, but the smallest town, can
Sure.
start to build an application that rewards citizens or that
Nice.
provides its citizen some type of integral application that they didn't once have. And now the city, what's unique about this, going to the DeFi side, is now that the cities, the residents, us, citizens, can have some kind of interaction, some kind of potential financial support in some way. But now that town can find new ways of getting budget that previously would not have existed. And we don't need to get into the details of how things are going with Citicoins, as there's major upgrades that have been progressing since that protocol is just over 9 months old.
Right.
But the things that we've seen with Miami, with New York, and other cities has all been test beds for a lot of this stuff. And now that small town can all of a sudden see a budget it never had, start deploying real infrastructure upgrades throughout the city, better lifestyles for its residents. That town can maybe grow into a city, or can just offer more benefits and do more with what it has, right? It can provide more to schools. It can provide more to healthcare, can provide more to, again, those infrastructure resources that every city looks for. But then it can also be very technical forward and doesn't need, again, this approval process that we've seen in so many ways, some of the headaches that those on the government side have experienced when trying to integrate new technologies as well.
Yeah.
But come to the citizens themselves, to Will and Albert's point, can start developing applications for their community, right? For their city, for their state, for their wherever they may be, and support those around them. I mean, it's kind of a wild example to toss out, but imagine, a PTO committee, right? So parent teacher committee, for instance, at a school, being able to put together, again, we're early, but everyone just walk with me for a minute. I mean, teachers and parents putting together something like a DAO where they can have new ways of approving governance, approving upgrades or budgets within the school. And now everyone has a say versus just one side or the other. And then us as alumni of those schools that gave us our early education that we would then go on and move away from can come back and contribute to that. Right now, none of us can do that at scale, right? We can't necessarily go back and just say, hey, here's a little bit of money. I've only got $100. Here's $100, do something. Instead, there's a whole nother process for that. But now, or in the future, I will say, in the near future, things like that can exist.
Yeah.
So we can contribute in ways, again, as society, citizens, in ways that we may not have otherwise. And to Will's point, now you've got companies that, yes, are providing this huge upgrade of infrastructure within cities to provide something of DeFi, of financial potential support or mechanisms to their everyday life, right? Being able to go around a city and connect to a Wi-Fi hotspot and be rewarded for that, or be able to exchange in a city-based token. So you could only do that within that particular city as well.
Right.
Or an example I like to give around Citicoins, the protocol is, imagine visiting a city for the first time, right? You land in that city, you land at MIA, at Miami International. And for being there for the first time, it's recognized via your smartphone, Bluetooth. Hey, we're here. Welcome back to the Internet of Things 2.0. You're now in Miami. And because of that, you are given 5 Miami coins from the city. And with those 5 Miami coins, you can go and interact with a local merchant. You can connect to Wi-Fi. You can engage in some public service. You can do something.
Awesome.
You can ride the train. You can participate in public transportation, all to help you get and welcome in a city you've never
Yeah.
been. Now, that's a
Tip
very
of the street.
touristy, exactly, a tip of street performer. There you go. Welcome to Hollywood. But there's so many great applications, and that's just a very simple touristy like application that could be very huge. I mean, imagine the
Powerful.
Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So there's that. Pause for a second. So going back to demo day and what to touch and add on to what Will and Albert mentioned, we were very fortunate that when we kicked off the first demo day, mainnet was just about 9 months in at that point. Citycoin's protocol had just launched, which played a bigger role later. But we got to see the very first decentralized exchanges. We got to see the very first stable coins. But because this was not a brand new industry, and to Will's point of being able to leverage a network that was already there, again, Stacks making coin, the network, programmable. Now you've got all these use cases that people may have wanted that security and that stability for, whether that
Right.
be around NFTs, whether that be around gaming, whether that be around so many of the other sectors that we started to see. Fast forward into cohort 2 or into the latest demo day that we just did a few weeks ago, we saw an explosion of new industries. We saw everything from climate to and carbon credits to decentralized autonomous organizations and DAOs. We started more gaming, game financing, so GameFi to game studios. We started seeing more infrastructure with DLC, as Will had mentioned as well, and many others. We saw music, we saw entertainment, we saw all of this world where people saw the opportunity to take advantage of, again, that security and stability that Stacks provides inherently through Bitcoin as well. And I can tell you as a preview, what we're already looking at on the world of the venture side and grants, along with those that Albert has been working with the pre-accelerator, are going to continue and add to those. What I have been speaking with Trevor this week, lower in New York, for instance, at NFT NYC, there are categories that all networks, all protocols, all layers are all very interested in because they are progressions of where this industry is going to go and where our digital lives are going as well, right? So anything from metaverses to avatars to, again, non-fungible tokens with utility. So going from art collectibles and moments to gated experiences to maybe something like the future of vehicle to vehicle communication to so much more that we're just getting the teases of right now.
That's exciting. That must be a lot of fun for you guys. I mean, seriously, I can't look. I've been a software junkie my whole life, so
Yeah.
trying and playing with new things that other people build is a lot of fun for me. But it must be a blast, kind of seeing this. And the cool thing is, Albert, you're getting to actually guide this, right? And as you guys mature in this ecosystem that you're building, and you have all these components of grants, venture fund, accelerator, pre-accelerator, you're going to start seeing what's what's moving, what's getting traction, what's happening, what's working. And be it you at the very beginning will actually be able to kind of help guide these new entrepreneurs that come in, maybe don't even have a real idea yet, but they know they want to build. You guys will have a nice path laid out, right? So from the education at the very beginning to all the way through to kind of fitting into the things or the holes or the things that are getting traction in the Stacks world. That's really fascinating to me. And I love that. And real quick, Kyle, I'm going to be really stuck on this civics government thing because that just unlocked like, bam, like I'm sitting here thinking about all of the things that that does, because that takes you from this wall and this bureaucracy that you have to deal with in your government and creates incentives for people to actually create and make it function better. So everything that everybody sits at home bitching about in their mass transit system or in their stores and restaurants, the traffic, whatever it is, you embolden and create an opportunity that's really powerful. And the really cool thing is the incentives aligned. I will tell you, when I first heard about city coins, I didn't deep dive into it. So my initial thought was, oh, that's a nice way to promote Stacks. That's cool. I like that. That's a great idea. Not fully grasping what you've kind of divulged here, which is this is not only is it empowering government, not only is it empowering citizens, not only does it provide more revenue to make towns and cities and counties be able to do more, but it's also evangelizing Stacks and city coins and to new users that may not have had a reason to use it. Something as simple as getting some free money from your city or getting some free privileges or being able to interact with your government in an easier, more automated fashion, that's pretty powerful. It's amazing.
It,
That's great.
it is. And I know Will's got a point.
Yeah.
'Cause and I'm going to probably steal it from him or Albert here in just a minute, but you're absolutely right. And for me, when we were building this evolution of our thesis, Trevor and I, we sat down and looked at with the City Coins community, what could this be, right? Bringing our knowledge and even my expertise in the Internet of Things of, what did and didn't work during that time and what did
Right.
others want that it couldn't have. But more importantly, what does future societies potentially look like, right? When you start to bring digital economies at scale into our world, it changes everything. And this is a piece of, the example I gave you was just touching the surface, right? The PTA, for instance, or the local community, instead of a volunteer system, maybe there's an incentive some way. The areas of infrastructure upgrade, maybe even data sharing around you in the city and how city movement is happening. There's so much potential there, but we're literally just starting
Right.
as well. And this is that enabling one of, but in our ecosystem, this is going to be one of enabling technologies and protocols that cities and governments can look to. And their citizens can also look to your point as well. And I can nerd out with you for days on
Dude, it
ideas,
would be
but
ugly.
to two additional points. This is why in the second half of this year, or excuse me, the first half of this year, 22, we actually worked with the City Coins community. And in our pre-accelerator and accelerator program, we brought in 12 companies that are building on City Coins in addition to Stacks native and
Nice.
finding applications that work for cities, for citizens, for governments as well at all different levels. And, we've teased out a few of those, and I'm happy to share the full list with you so you could show
Yeah,
it
yeah, I'd love to.
those.
That'd be great if you could send that over.
Yeah. But this, I will tell you, the upgrade of City Coins 1 to 2.0 that we just had happen is going to be even cooler to see some of these new applications that are going to come down the line. And one last thing that I am going to take from both Will and Albert, and I'm going to steal their thunder for a minute. So the other advantage of City Coins. So Will mentioned how Stacks and our native token STX works, and there's a yield of Bitcoin on top of that. Stacking is how we refer to it versus staking in the traditional EVM world. With City Coins, that also plays into effect. So that example I gave of the small town being able to receive a budget that it may not have had previously. So with a city-based token, so Miami, for instance, someone can build an application on the City Coins protocol, and they can do that in the city of Miami or the state of Florida and leverage the City Coin. Well, the city itself has some of that in a treasury. And I'm skipping some details, but just to help make the point. But they can actually hold that City Coin. That City Coin will then stacks, which then stacks and yields back Bitcoin. So
Nice.
now, through the power of digital assets and decentralized technologies, governments and their citizens and communities, et cetera, now have these new financial mechanisms, these new budgets that they may not have otherwise.
Yeah,
have
that's
as
brilliant.
well.
Yeah, and it's
I skipped a lot.
stacking and growing in value. I get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I skipped a few
But-
technical details. So no,
There's
plenty out there on citycoins.co to learn.
Well, and here's the cool thing, right? Because now Albert's going to have to run pre-accelerators in every city in the world, because what's going to happen is as users and developers and technical people see what the city's doing and see that there's opportunities to connect with and generate revenue and interact and join
Yeah.
businesses together, you're going to build this ecosystem of people that are saying, well, in my city, I can do this. I'm going to build this here. And then I'm also going to send this over to Tampa and help them build this. Right. And I've got some incentive, some revenue mechanism, whatever. Plus I'm earning by stacking, right? Whatever I've put into building this. There's just a ton of a little bit mind-blowing possibilities here.
Well, first and foremost, we know
I'm on
Albert
this
of
one.
we know Albert of all people can do this. He ran 9 at one time.
It's incredible.
I think he can manage 20 cities. That's
There you go.
my opinion.
Awesome.
One additional nerd out moment for you as well, Brad. So that whole stacking term. Let's continue to refer to that as well. So the cool thing about a city's coin, a city's token, pardon me, is that technology and what one city used can actually be leveraged for the next.
Right.
So versus restarting technology or restarting applications, one city can say, hey, I really like 8 of the 10 features that you built out for your city. We want to use those 8 and we want to put 8 more. And then another city, et cetera, et cetera. And so for poor Albert, instead of having to run 20, 40, or hundreds of free accelerators, we're very fortunate that technology allows that leverage on all layers as well. So
how do developers interested in civic and entrepreneurial and whatever it may be, is the ecosystem building kind of a library of code and best practices? I mean, I know it's accessible, but I mean, once you reach kind of a critical mass, you're going to have a lot being built. How would new developers be able to find that? Or is that something you guys are still working through?
I'm gonna toss that over to Will. He's got all those reference links.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that at the end of the day, you're either looking at the Stacks Network GitHub repo and going from there. A lot of it is, as I mentioned, you can be in the Block Explorer and just look at any smart contract there. So all of the smart contracts are viewable just right from exploring, looking for a transaction and then finding the contract associated with it. And then all the grant related work is all getting tied back to GitHub also. And so that's all going to start to come together. I mean, I think that there's, again, we're like 15 months into that. And so we're kind of learning what we have on our hands, and we're, I guess trying to figure out, we don't want to slice it up too many segments or too few segments. And so really what we've been doing at the grants program is breaking down all of the grants and sort of being able to get an understanding of what has the most interest in terms of the most applications and, coming in and most that are being accepted and denied and the average dollar per grant that comes through. And then we've been taking some insights from that and trying to define 8 different tracks of grants. So there's kind of 8 different areas of interest. And so through those 8 areas of interest, I think that we'll be able to, we also have a resonance program, which is more like an academic subject matter expert. So we're able to help identify who the subject matter experts are within those 8 tracks and start to come up with community advisory boards, that are led by those subject matter experts. And so that all ties back to governance. And so really these decisions about, where, how is the code, sort of kept and maintaining that, I guess the short answer is in a number of places right now, we're trying to figure out how to consolidate it, but it's always this, at the foundation, where I work, we're always having a conversation. We're trying to be very cognizant of, we know that there's a large treasury that we are, stewards of, but we want to make sure that we're allocating those funds, in the best interest of the community. And what we don't want to do with those funds is just kind of become this big, I guess, apparatus that provides everything to everyone. And it would be this central entity. If we are going to be a decentralized ecosystem, we need to really be mindful of that and make sure that we're focusing on education and governance and allowing as many good ideas to become a few competing great ideas and a few builders to become great leaders, and then allow the organization of that to all reveal itself organically. So it's definitely a little unintentional or intentional chaos, but I like to think of it as being an architect, just building the trellis and not putting the ivy on the trellis, but just having the scaffolding there and then letting the ivy over time grow.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like it could be an opportunity for someone as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's a great metaphor.
that's what the meta.
what Kyle said and what Will said has really, and great questions by the way, Brad, really inspired me to have to, like a metaphor came into my mind, right? Ethereum, right? Because all this talk about city coins and about towns and empowering towns. Ethereum is sort of like the United States East Coast. To develop first, it's a force to be reckoned with, right? Stacks and Bitcoin is like California. It's like the West Coast. It's a land grab, right? It's like an unharvested San Francisco, which, as we know, used to be a gold mine, right? And it's a land grab. I mean, even with city coins, we're at the beginning of a massive transformation. Okay, in the blockchain world globally, the world's a big place. Stacks, we could handle several city coin projects. You can either work with city coins or you could build your own. Because I mean, whenever we're talking about cities, it's very relationship driven. So if you have, this is a call to people globally, right? If you have deep ties with the government, if you're involved with the government in your city, either look for city coins to cooperate with, or build your own on top of Stacks.
Nice. I
Well,
love that. I love that.
Just like, the world's a big place. This is enough to eat for everyone, right?
That's nice.
So,
Yeah.
so Brad, yeah. So Brad, let me come back to the initial question. So where can everyone go to learn a little bit more, whether they're a developer or looking to begin building, whether that's on Citycoin, Stacks with Clarity or some of the other programs? So stacks.co. So definitely go to stacks.co, or you'll be able to learn everything about what's happening at the protocol level. Also, a lot of the programs that we mentioned. So being able to find the repo. So there's direct links into GitHub, to Clarity University, as well as many other resources and documentations for developers alike, beginners to very advanced. And if you're looking to get into the residency program or anything of that nature, grants started at not only stacks.co, but also stacks.org. Org is our foundation where Will works, and you'll be able to find out a lot more about those, again, grants and residency programs. From a technology level, stacks.co. And then if you want to learn more about Citycoin's protocol, so citycoins.co as well. So for the developers out there that are listening, that are looking for those resources, Brad, to what you're asking, those are your three starting points. Citycoins.co for everything Citycoins protocol, stacks.org for everything around the grants and residency programs and so much more that the foundation offers, and then stacks.co. And that's everything about the technology itself, tons of documentation, tons of resources and links to some of the things that we've spoken about today, whether that be the GitHub repos, whether that be Clarity University, and many others as well. And we have others that we'll talk about.
I want to throw one more in there.
Sure.
Hero.so, which is hiro.so. And again, that's the developer tooling company. And so that's another great technical resource for people to go. And Clarinet is the online testing environment for smart contracts. And it's a tool that they make, stacks.js, the API. So there's a lot of different resources and tools that you can learn about there also.
Great. Guys, we've gone a long time and taking your time. And I keep thinking about poor Kyle out there exhausted and ready to crash. And I have about 150 more questions I could be asking you guys. Like, I want to dive into like specific projects, and we're just not going to get there. So my apologies. I probably should have been a little more cognizant of that, but all three of you are such a fascinating piece of this ecosystem. I feel like I should have done a separate interview with each of you, but I have a couple of more questions, and then I want to let you guys just, if there's, I'm sure there's things that you want to tell me about, or you want to tell the listeners about that we're missing. But I have one question, kind of a big picture question. And I think it's kind of in the realm of positioning of Stacks, right? And Albert and I talked about this last week a little bit when we first chatted. One of the things I see as an advantage for Stacks is the Bitcoin brand, right? I mean, that it is the brand of crypto first and foremost for most of the rest of the world. Most of the rest of the world doesn't even understand that DeFi exists. They see tokens in an exchange and waiting for value to go up, right? Those that are actually investing and those that are not. I was on a train 3 weeks ago, and I was talking to this couple who were talking about how much they've invested in crypto, and none of them had ever done anything off of a centralized exchange, right? but they felt like they were part of it, right? So I think Bitcoin has this brand established of the first way in, right? The first thing that people know of, the brand that they know of. On the other side of it, in the DeFi world over here, with this kind of small minority of people in the world that are doing DeFi on Ethereum or DeFi on other chains, that's kind of the the place that DeFi is known to exist, right? And that's where the core group of users are, which actually I think is a disadvantage for DeFi in general, because developers seem to focus on the same core set of users over and over again in Ethereum and Avalanche and Phantomland. A benefit to you all is that you can focus on both, right? You can go after the existing users, but you can also have opportunities. Anyway, wow, long-winded question. The bottom line is this: is do you sometimes feel like when you're out there beating the drum for stacks that you guys are kind of in this middle ground of, over here is DeFi world, over here is Bitcoin and crypto world. You've got the maximalists in the Bitcoin world that don't even think you guys should exist, or because you're not pure enough on chain. Does it feel sometimes like you're kind of navigating this weird thing, or you just feel like, you know what, screw it, we're going to break out and do our own thing. We don't give a shit what anybody says.
I think
Let me try to take that one actually, because I come in from like a sort of like a newbie lens. So let's zoom up for a second. So it's 2022. We just had a few crashes. It's been a long time coming globally, not just the US, right?
That's right.
So, but it affected everything, including crypto. So moving into a recession, or some people may call it depression, whatever you call it, we're going to a bear market, right? So if you look at this as one macro indicator, in addition, if you look at the increased talk around regulation, right? Some governments have already taken a stance. China is taking a hard stance against it. El Salvador is obviously on the other end of the spectrum, and everyone's sort of holding their breath for what the U.S. is going to do, and that's going to influence a lot of countries, right? So it's going to be a lot of tectonic shifts in the entire world, including crypto space, right? So, going back to our metaphor about building up stacks and Bitcoin is like a land grab, right? The wild, wild west, right? And so just like the wild, wild west, you have a bunch of towns, right? A bunch of towns, and the towns that are protected or who have who are in favor in terms of government regulation, they get the railroads, they get the incentives, right? And they get to stay alive. The ones that do not have regulation protection, the wells dry up, the railroad no longer gets maintained there, it's gone, right? And guess what? Most of these blockchains are going to be those ghost towns, right?
Nice.
Stacks and Bitcoin. So we're not even in the middle. We're the future, and it's probably only one of the few possible scenarios of the future. But no matter what scenario you're in, because we're on Bitcoin, and it's already getting adopted by governments around the world. It's like you said. I think I love this quote that Brad in our last conversation. It's a thing that always comes back. It's a thing that always comes back. So when everyone's scared, go back to the thing that's most stable. And then so if we're looking at going back to this metaphor of towns, what's present in every single town? First, you have infrastructure, right? So just going back to the question of what kind of projects are coming to our ecosystem, anything that the picks and shovels infrastructure, all that's awesome. The second thing is, what do you see in every single Western small town? You see the bank and you see the saloon, right? So what is that? That's DeFi, okay, and that's gaming. Okay, that's fun, because you need to have the financial engine for anything to run, right? Along with the infrastructure. But who doesn't like to have fun?
Sure.
Right? So as far as our pre-accelerator is concerned, we're gonna start. And what happens in every single recession? People tighten up their wallets, right? And they stay at home more. And what do they end up doing more? End up playing more games.
That's true.
Right? That's right. So DeFi is something that just has to exist for the metaverse. Gaming is like the precursor for what will happen for metaverse. And looking at the micro environment, it also makes sense to, invite more gaming people to our platform, right? Because first of all, you're protected by the regulation because Bitcoin, right? And then in this, people are scratching their, oh man, how am I going to get investor money? Well, go to the thing that makes money and investors will follow.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And the story. Right?
Yeah,
so
Yeah.
Brad, to tack on the Ethereum versus Bitcoin question that you threw out is this, again, industry as we're talking about is still very new. The technology, again, is still being trialed. There's ups, there's downs. There's some places for some applications and some for others. And I believe that we definitely are in a world that all can exist or many can exist. There can be those that are building and leveraging on the Bitcoin network, as there are others than us at Stacks, whether that be Lightning, RSK, there are others. And
Sure.
then there is the world of Ethereum. There's Ethereum itself and the EVM entire universe that exists as well. And again, each has their place for applications, for users, and for categories or industries that we have spoken about. And there's also those that are interoperable, or the blockchains of blockchains, as some of them refer to themselves as, that are interoperable and connect all around as well. We also have those that are protocols that are very specific to different industries and categories, whether that's gaming to DeFi to regions as well. And there's also those that are enterprise based versus public based. So while that is a common discussion, I think for all of us, I'll throw out there that that's not something we tend to look at other than just finding our place in the world, working with those that want to build and leverage our technology and helping to have and onboard them into this world. And if it's not the fit, there are other networks out there that are doing great things that we are also bridging, and they are also bridging to us as well. This is an interoperable world going forward in most cases. Some there will not be, but most cases there are. So for all of us, and myself here on the venture side, we don't look at that conversation. It's not about the asset. It's not about the network. It's about what is being built and what is the best place for those being building.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent approach. And look, I think you're right. I think at the end of the day, it's serving a purpose for the people using the technology. And it doesn't necessarily mean that any one thing is going to be the thing. And so I think that makes a ton of sense. I think I phrased the question a little inelegantly because I sit back thinking about being in your world when I'm already kind of living in this world, right? And I think that it must just be like, wow, there's all this promise, all this great stuff is happening. It's kind of in a weird position to be in, but it's actually really exciting that you guys are. I mean, like you said, 15 months. That's incredibly new, right? While you're built on top of the original granddaddy technology of all the blockchains. So to me, it's incredible. It's incredible. That's great.
And I would agree. It's very exciting. So instead of being in a comparison world, there's no value in that. If we're always comparing ourselves to something else and fighting that fight, it's a losing battle. Instead, we are very excited about focusing on what we do. And as I said, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. That's okay. There's plenty of other networks out there and protocols. And as on the venture side, I will be the first to tell you that. But
That's awesome.
we want to be there for those that want to be there, and those that want to be educated to see if it is a fit. We're here for you as well. And it is exciting because it's a year and a half in. We're just getting started. Not to use the same quote we all use about the industry, but we are just getting started.
Truth. Yeah.
Right. So there's so much to learn. There's so much to see. There's so much to still figure out in where our niches are. And to be honest, so are other networks. I won't name any of them, but there is an entire world of this industry that is all trying to figure it out too. No need to compare ourselves.
Every one of them is trying to figure it out.
There you go.
Nobody has all the answers.
There's definitely going to be a healthy level of competition, also collaboration.
Yeah.
I would like to point out, that our ecosystem has hands down one of the best pre-accelerators globally.
Nice.
Yes. Most, because most of it, it doesn't matter if you're a city or blockchain, whatever, right? What you'll notice, and you'll see a lot of accelerators, but you almost see no pre-accelerators.
It's true.
The community expects this to grow organically, right? And part of it is organic, but another part is it helps a lot if you have part of it is structured, and then you have people who have, done this maybe, they're a few steps ahead of you, right? And they share their knowledge, and then there's a science to startup, right?
Absolutely.
One of the beautiful things we did, becoming the longest running pre-accelerator in China, was that we're agnostic in terms of industry. We have online, offline, blockchain, not blockchain, AI, drones, like beachwear, restaurants, etc. And we're also half, meaning like half female, half male, right? And what we found out was that no matter if you're doing a fast growth startup or like a more traditional business, if you're starting something from ideation to something to profit, there are so many commonalities, right, in there that you could say it's a science. It's actually a science, right? One day it'll become like, it won't be this mysterious thing. It'll be integrated into our education system. It's like, innovation is just, well, that's what we should have done. We should have never lost that quality, you know,
Sure.
going through like the schooling system we have today, right? So if people want to learn a lifelong skill and 100x your chances of success, literally 100x your chances of success, come to Stacks. We have one of the best pre-accelerator programs. We have this is like sort of like a baton race, right? After us is the accelerator and the ventures, which Kyle and Trevor runs. And then Will, he represents the foundation, which is like the glue that binds everything together. You might get a grant before you come in the pre-accelerator. You might get a grant after, right? But it's there to make sure that even if you fall, there's still somebody there to support you.
Nice.
Right?
That's
There's money, there's people, there's a spirit of innovation.
Well, and I think that really positions the whole ecosystem beautifully, that that wherever you enter, there's a place for you to gain, to learn, to grow, to connect. And that makes a huge difference when somebody's trying to start something new. That's just monster good stuff. Listen, I've taken way too much of your lives, but I'm so grateful for you doing it.
It's been a pleasure. We're grateful too.
I ask a question at the end of every show. You guys are going to have to do it fast. You're not going to have a lot of time to think about it, but I ask everybody that comes on the show, who is someone or a project, and it's usually someone that you are inspired by or that you are excited about in any aspect of the crypto, blockchain, DeFi world that you think is going to be important going forward, or that you just have a ton of respect for. Who wants to go first?
Wow. There's so many people to respect, so many people that inspire me.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Will.
There's a team of builders.
I'll go next.
There's a team of builders in Stacks that have an NFT marketplace called Byzantium, and they're building an indexer, a framework, and it is going to take a data lake, ingesting the Stacks blockchain, and then they're also building that to be able to take in additional blockchains and give you, I guess, a persistent state understanding of the blockchain over time. And so being able to, much like the graph, being able to give you an understanding of not just the history of the block, but the history of every transaction, that goes along with an asset. And so really, I think that the additional richness that's going to come out of that data being available to all builders is going to be, again, lend itself to creating a bunch of other projects. And so shameless plug, that was a grant. It was on a large grant. And the reason why it's a large grant is because this is technology that they've already built. And they said, hey, we have aspirations to take this multi-chain and to, build a second version of this and make an opinionated version of this indexer. And we want to make it open source. And the only way we can afford to make it open source is if we have support. So we actually talked them into making it open source because we thought that everyone's going to benefit from it. And they after a moment of consideration, they realized, hey, that's totally aligned with how we do things. And that is actually going to open up a whole number of other, potential business use cases that can build off of that. And so it's something that's going to be an additional layer of foundational infrastructure for everyone to benefit from.
Yeah. And it benefits this ecosystem and all of the crypto ecosystems. It sounds like that's fantastic, man. That's a great example. Kyle, you want to go next?
I have a slew of names and would selfishly throw out Trevor Owens, my partner, as well. But to avoid any other name drops, I will throw out one project, and that's Council, which is building a whole new set of DAO tooling, but also community management tool. I am actually looking forward to this as a clean, quieter, simplified, but all-in-one management tool outside of Discord. For anyone that's looking to manage a community or build a DAO.
Anything out of Discord makes me a happy camper. I'm so going to check that out.
Yeah. A shout out to Chris and his team for putting that together, council.xyz. But again, there's a ton of great people in this industry, too many to name, in all ecosystems across the board that inspire me every day to continue to do this, that we're lucky enough to co-invest with. And honestly, we're lucky as an industry to have here as well. But
Sure. That's
we're all on
perfect. I
Twitter.
love that. It's great.
Yeah. And I would like to add, yes, they built it on Stacks. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have one,
Oh,
Albert?
yeah. I mean, honestly, I can't just do one because I owe my entire career to so many people. But let me just say recently, recently what's happened in my life. Like number one, it like Brad, our previous conversation, that was really great. So you definitely inspired me, giving, just I really appreciate the feedback you gave me and some of like the knowledge that you've accumulated by talking to a lot of people in the space. I really appreciate that.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. And on an everyday basis, yeah, no, definitely. We would definitely have to have more talks. I mean, I know that it's
Absolutely.
2 hours, but definitely we'll set up another private talk. I really enjoyed that one. So if you don't mind, we could
No, of
jam
course
again.
not. Love it.
Yeah. And this sort of leads in because I would also like to invite you to speak at our pre-accelerator when you have time, like after your high Pacific Coast tour, right? But
Thanks.
so
Would love
so
to.
on the line of being a mentor, the mentor group as a whole, Kyle, Will, Trevor, everyone who's spoken at the pre-accelerator or is going to speak at the pre-accelerator, they've inspired me in their own way, right? Because everyone has a gift. Everyone has a gift. And I think it's our job. Like part of the happiness of life is being able to train yourself to see that gift in each person. And then the more you try it, the more you're able to see the gift in people and the more you become inspired by anyone you come into contact with. Right? So that's at the mentor level. And of course, at our founder level, all the teams, right? Just watching them go through a story, even though I've seen this like a million times, right? This is what I do, but it never ceases to amaze me when they come in like, yeah. And then they're like, oh no. And then they get back up, right? And just like watching them go through that is uplifting and inspiring every time because, as time goes on, the demand is all the same, but the innovation and the solutions are different. So that's fresh, right? And then everyone with their special gifts will take the technology and then turn it into something like in their own way, very great, right? And that's a group effort, right? That is a group effort.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't believe in the term self-made. I think that's a complete oxymoron because you didn't have a partner, you didn't have parents that brought you in this world, you didn't have customers. Don't tell me that you're self-made. Don't tell me.
That's great.
Like it's a communal effort, right? So
yeah.
So
that's awesome. Those are perfect answers. Guys, thank you again for your incredible generosity of your time.